Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kinder, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you are interested in listening to these, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you're looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 45 of Breaking Step. Tibbs ran the roofs. He ran hard without a destination. The need to escape the thoughts running through his head pushed him. He'd left the party as soon as he'd made sure Lamberto was fine. He'd told himself he was going after the assassins. The assassin was ready to give that as an explanation for his hurried departure if one of the noble demanded he stayed. He demanded he stay. He just wanted to be away from them all. You know what? From all of them. He just wanted to be away from all of them. Away from Lamberto, that idiot for throwing himself between Tibbs and the knife meant for him. He'd have been fine. He didn't need saving, especially not by some kid who thought Tibbs was some grand hero that deserved protecting. He ran harder. He didn't care if the nobles complained to Tirania. Tibbs had saved one of their lives. How much more goodwill did she expect from him? And it wasn't even needed. He'd made it to his room without letting what Lamberto did crowd his mind, but as soon as he was on his bed, that, and how Tibbs had treated him, rushed in and wouldn't quiet. He'd put on his armor and climbed to the roof and ran. "I am not a bigot," he growled into the wind. Of course he wasn't. Tibbs had reasons to hate nobles. Good reasons. They were horrible people. They came to his street, his town, and took over everything. They forced people to defer to them for no other reason than they were owed deferment for being nobles. There. That was proof there was no such thing as a good noble. Only Amelia wasn't all that bad. Not bad at all, when Tibbs allowed himself to be honest. Her friends weren't horrible either. He didn't care for her brother. The man was too full of himself. But in the way of people who knew a lot. Not in the usual nobles give me what I want way. And he helped the town as much as Amelia did without asking anything in return. A handful of them versus all the other nobles Tib had encountered didn't mean he was wrong in thinking they were all bad. He stopped running. His breath wouldn't come to him. How could he be having trouble breathing? He wasn't a bigot, he told himself. You know what? He told himself. He'd been under the heels of too many bigots to ever be one himself. He knew better. Bigots were one step below nobles when it came to people Tibbs considered bad. "I am not a bigot," he yelled to the sky. Then why had he been so terrible to Lamberto? What had the young noble done to deserve that? Been born a noble? Was his annoying over-eagerness the justification for how Tibbs thought of him? What he said? Had his enthusiasm at having Tibbs meet people Lamberto considered friends made him such a horrible person? Had the way the boy looked at Tibbs, awe and hope, been the thing that made him unredeemable? No. Tibbs had looked at him, branded him noble, and that had been the end of it. Exactly how nobles branded Tibbs as not worth their attention without ever learning anything about him. What had Tibbs branded Don as? Asshole, liar, opportunist, the manipulator, irredeemable. Based on what? Who the sorcerer used to be? On one manipulation Tibbs hadn't been willing to let him explain? The lashing out the man did after the fact? And how Tibbs acted when he was hurt or angry? Maybe if he'd cared while they shared a room, Tibbs would have been able to see the lies and manipulations earlier and not find himself in this position. But he'd been iced and hadn't cared about Dawn's motivation beyond how the sorcerer could help him. Hadn't that been Tibbs using him without caring for what Dawn might want? Wasn't that what he was blaming the sorcerer for doing? The scream was formed of pained anger. He didn't want to know Don's reason. His side of this didn't matter. He had lied and hurt Tibbs. The man was nothing more than a wannabe noble who put himself first no matter who suffered. And there was nothing more to be had about that. And Tibbs was a fucking bigot. Okay, this I need to change. Why couldn't light go about? Because, as my co-scriptor pointed out, when it happened, Tibbs was channeling light, and he's not doing that right now. But I do have an alternative. Why couldn't light go about blinding him? For thinking that, because that is the constant. Even when he's not channeling light, Tibbs, when somebody lies, the words light up. And, in his case, it's, he's angry and all that, so I can fudge things a little bit. Why couldn't light go about blinding him for thinking that? Like it did every other time he told himself such a large lie. No, actually, this can actually still stay like that. It does establish that I may have to go back and tweak some paragraph where he does mentally lie to himself. Especially while iced. But anyway, the answer was self-evident. He scanned the dark roof, wondering where the sorcerer was. He stretched his sense as far as it would go, but other than the pool, he didn't sense anyone with corruption as their element. But he couldn't sense the whole town. When had that happened? He had a passing thought about the pool and why its owner weren't here looking for ways to make coins from it, then set that aside for more important matters. Like talking with Lamberto, apologizing for how he treated him. But that would have to wait, since security would be higher after the attempted assassination, and Tibbs would guide his team through the dungeon. He could talk with him there, which only left one thing to do. He ran. Only this time, he sensed ahead for someone to run towards instead of blindly running away. This was not where Tibbs expected to find the sorcerer. He'd expected to sense Dawn among one of the better parts of Craggle Rock, not here, in one of the poorer parts. Any poorer. Any poorer, and it would be included in Broken Place. He couldn't be in that building because he couldn't. Yeah. Okay. That's two couldn't very close to each other. I don't care for that. He couldn't be in that building because he was out of coins to pay for something better. Because he was out of coins, plural, to pay for something better. The loot from the runs had been good, and if there was one thing Tibbs had learned about the sorcerer, it was that while he liked nice things, it wasn't so much that he'd throw all his coins at them. So why was he in this rooming house for workers when there were much better options only blocks away? The only thing Don had arranged, from what Tibbs sensed, was to have a room to himself instead of sharing it with a dozen other people. The sorcerer sat, a tankard half filled with a drink brimming with corruption, alcohol, something stronger than ale. Of course, the man would like more refined drinks. Tibbs looked into the dark room from the window, not even a candle for him to read by. Clearly Don wanted to be left alone, and Tibbs should respect that. He tapped the window. With darkness as his element, Tibbs had no problem seeing Dawn turn, look at him, outlined in Clara's mostly fully opened eyes light, and frown. He took the lack of protest as acknowledgement, along with the unlocked window, and entered, sitting on the windowsill. Like my day couldn't get any worse, Don muttered, draining half the tanker's content before putting it down. What do you want? How much have you had to drink? There was an empty bottle next to the tankard. Don didn't sound drunk, but this wasn't a conversation to be had if the man wasn't at least close to sober. Don threw a tankard at Tibbs, who caught it with water, along with the splash content. Along with the splash content. He deposited it before the sorcerer, leaving it filled with water, and absorbed the rest, leaving the corruption to dissipate. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get drunk with corruption as your element? Don demanded. No, of course you don't. You don't know anything. You just like to think you do. You're too fucking good for anyone. Tibbs forced himself to remain seated. He wouldn't give in to his anger and, fuck off, Tibbs, the sorcerer snapped. I'm not dealing with your condescension tonight. What happened? He asked, in as calm a tone as he could. Like you fucking care. Fine. Tibbs was halfway out before realizing he'd moved. Go on, get out of here, Don said at Tibbs's back. You don't want me here any more than anyone else. Tibbs sat down, silent. Any more than anyone else? The sarcastic thought wanted to be voiced. Didn't Don proclaim how much he was? How much liked he was? How much he was liked? I know this is French grammar slipping into English writing. How much he was liked? How people clamored to be on his team? If only Tyrannia would let him have one of his own. Didn't he deserve a little sarcasm at the condescension he'd thrown Tibbs's way? I'm sorry. Oh, fuck off. You think I need your pity? You think that if you're nice enough to me, I'll swallow the bullshit and return to your team so you can treat me like some street-rated replacement for that? He snapped his mouth shut, and Tibbs swallowed the pain at her memory. He didn't have time for it now. Don looked away. I'm sorry, that wasn't fair to her. He took a swallow, made a face, then took another. You aren't? He stopped at the sorcerer's glare. Why are you even here? To say I'm sorry for how I treated you? I get grace with Tibbs's apology, he replied sarcastically. Hooray for me. Oh, will you? Tibbs closed his mouth and breathed down the anger. I treated you badly, he said through gritted teeth. Unjustly so. And that's such a revelation to you? Tibbs looked away and whispered, yes. He felt the stare and forced himself to look. You expect me to believe you didn't know how you were an asshole to me? Do you realize it when you're being an asshole? Tibbs asked defensively. Oh yeah, Don smirked. Unlike Jackie Boy, I don't come by pissing people off by accident. Tibbs almost asked why he did it, but he vaguely remembered a conversation about the subject while he was iced. He'd barely paid attention. His curiosity had been sated, and that was more important than the answer Don had given. I thought I was better than that, Tibbs said. Don snorted, and Tibbs had to swallow his anger again. Why are you here, Tibbs? Don asked, sounding tired when the silence stretched. To say I'm sorry. Fine, you said it. You can leave. Don was right. He could go. He didn't have to force more on the man, who clearly didn't want him there. He could leave things as they were. It would be easy. Why did you lie? He asked. Why have Tyrannia say it was her idea? Like you're going to believe me. I will. Don rolled his eyes and drank. I was scared, he finally said, and the words were dark. Of what? Don glared at him. Of you! Of you saying no, he added before Tibbs could get over the surprise. Of not having anyone around me who'd have the guts to call me on my bullshit. Jackie might be some clueless, muscle-bound idiot, but he's good at not letting jackasses like me get away with it. He doesn't like the competition, Tibbs said before he could stop himself. Don snorted. Like he can compete with me. He studied Tibbs. You're not calling me a liar. Tibbs shrugged. Why do you believe me? The sorcerer asked suspiciously. Tibbs shrugged again. He couldn't explain it without bringing light into it, and he wasn't ready for that. What happened? Don asked in the, again, stretching silence. To make you seek me out. I know you well enough to know this isn't something you just do. You thought about it and decided to ask if I'd lie. I'm a bigot. Don narrowed his eyes, but didn't comment. Tibbs sighed. I had to go to a noble's party. Galdane, I heard. Tibbs was annoyed, but didn't comment. Lamberto, that's one of his sons, who'll run the dungeon, was all over me with how glad he was to meet me. He dragged me around and introduced me to everyone. You let a noble drag you around? Don asked, amused. Tirania told me to make a good impression, and I need her to think I'm on her side. So, blasting the annoyance through a wall wasn't an option. He paused, and he wouldn't have deserved it. You're saying that of a noble, Don said, sounding surprised. He must be quite the man. Boy, he's younger than Jackal and you. I unleashed my anger on him when it turned out everyone else at the party thought of me as nothing more than a trick to be watched and snickered at. It wasn't his fault, the others were horrible people, but I still made it his fault when all he'd done was the best he could to make this a good experience for me. He even told his older brothers and sister to leave me alone. Not alone. He paused again. And after I screamed at him, treated him like some noble who only acted like I mattered because he'd gained something from it, he took a knife from me. Don raised an eyebrow. There was this assassin after his brother. I got in her way, but she had a partner who tried to stab me while she had me distracted. Lamberto shoved me and took it in my place. He might have died before anyone could do anything, but he filled the wound with crystal and kept it from bleeding out. Tibs chuckled. He had just no idea how he did it. Fear and a desire to survive can get you to do a lot you didn't know you could. You should know that. You should know how that goes. You don't sound surprised. There was an attack. Don shrugged. Back home, if there isn't at least one attempt at killing an attendee, it's not considered a successful party. And you want to be like them? Tibbs asked in disbelief. Money, power, and getting anything they want. Yeah, I wanted that. Especially after they took what my family had away from us. The silence fell again. Don drained the tankard and presented it to Tibbs, who refilled it. Why were you so angry when you found out joining your team was my idea? Tibbs made himself a tankard out of ice to have something to do while he considered his answer. He hadn't thought when he'd found out. He'd just reacted. He'd lashed out like he did when, because it was easier to be angry at you than feel the pain at this guy I'd started liking. That, okay, feeling the pain, that, come on, where are you? There you are. That this guy I'd started liking was using me for some selfish plan. You aren't that horrible of a person when you let yourself be, and it hurt to think that had been an act. It was an act, of a sort, Don said, and I did have a selfish plan. Trying to be better isn't selfish. The sorcerer nodded. But is that what it is? If I have to deceive you to get it? You were afraid. I get how that is. And you were hurt, Don replied. I get that too. Again, they were silent. What happens now? I'd like you to come back to the team. The others might not go along with that. Jackal will. He's angry at you because I was angry. Comdar doesn't care beyond the team being whole for the runs. But Mez, I can explain my side to him, Tibbs said, hesitating, but I need to apologize to him. He was the one who tried to help me as soon as I joined your team. And with how I treated him when I forced him on my team, that puts him on the level of heroes of songs. I think he'll understand once he knows why. If he believes me. Tibbs stopped himself. Sure, he could tell Mez that Don wasn't lying, and Mez would believe him, but would the sorcerer question how easy it was? Tibbs could explain everything to Don. That would make things simpler. The man was honest about all of it, after all. Tibbs could even ask if he had plans on betraying him and the team, and he'd know if that answer was true. But Light didn't know the future, only how people felt about what they said. It would only be a lie if Don planned on betraying them. But circumstances change, and the sorcerer could be tempted. Tibs couldn't know what he'd do then. And that was too much of a risk right now. And that concludes chapter 45 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that and support me, that is on my Patreon. We're about 20 chapters ahead. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the note. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.